Over a 32-year career, this man made more than 3,000 arrests across some of the most lawless territory in America. He tracked killers other marshals wouldn't chase. He worked undercover in disguises so convincing his own posse sometimes didn't recognize him, and in 1902 he took a warrant for murder and rode out to arrest his own son. This is the story of Bennie Reeves. He was born enslaved in July of 1838 in Crawford County, Arkansas, held by a man named William Reeves. When the Reeves family relocated to Texas, he was taken along and forced to serve as a companion to the enslaver's son, George, a role that meant guard, valet, and whatever else was demanded of him. During the Civil War, accounts say a card game between the two men turned violent, and he beat George badly enough that he had to flee for his life. He escaped into Indian Territory, what's now Oklahoma, and spent years there among the Creek and Seminole nations, likely fighting with Indian regiments allied with the Union. It was time that would define the rest of his life. He learned the terrain of a land most white lawmen would never be able to navigate. He learned multiple native languages fluently.
We were born into slavery. We escaped it. Everything that came after, he built with his own hands.
When the 13th Amendment freed him, he settled in Arkansas, married a woman named Jenny, and started working as a guide for deputy marshals heading into Indian Territory, since almost nobody else alive knew that ground and those languages the way he did. He and Jenny would eventually raise 11 children together. In 1875, Judge Isaac Parker, the man history remembers as the hanging judge, took over the federal court at Fort Smith and needed deputies willing to ride into some of the most dangerous territory in the country to enforce federal law. Indian Territory earned that reputation honestly. An estimated 120 federal lawmen died in the line of duty there before statehood finally arrived in 1907. Parker recruited him. He became one of the first black deputy U.S. Marshals west of the Mississippi River. He stood over 6 feet 2 inches tall, an imposing figure before anyone even learned what he could do. He was ambidextrous, could shoot accurately with either hand, and never lost a gunfight. He'd never been taught to read or write. That had been denied him as an enslaved child. So every warrant had to be read to him aloud, and he simply memorized it. The name, the charge, the description, sometimes a dozen warrants at a time, held in his head across a manhunt that could last months. In 32 years, he's not recorded as ever having brought back the wrong man. He built a reputation the outlaws of Indian Territory came to fear specifically. He worked undercover more than almost any other marshal of the era, disguised as a farmer, a preacher, a drifter, sometimes as an outlaw himself, walking straight into a wanted man's camp before the man ever knew who he was talking to. Because everyone knew he couldn't read, he turned that reputation into a weapon of its own. More than once, cornered by an outlaw with a gun already drawn, he asked to have a letter from home read aloud one last time, and used the moment of distraction to draw first. He tracked the Seminole outlaw Greenleaf, wanted for 7 murders and uncaught for 18 years, and brought him in. He went after Cherokee outlaw Ned Christie and burned him out of his stronghold. He broke up the Tom Story gang of horse thieves running the Red River Valley. He was shot at more times than anyone counted. A bullet went through his hat in one gunfight and took the belt clean off his waist in another. And he was never once wounded.
Over 3 decades, he built one of the most effective careers in the history of American law enforcement. More than 3,000 arrests, and a reputation nothing in that territory could outrun.
You've probably heard that Bennie Reeves was the real-life inspiration for the Lone Ranger. It's one of the most repeated claims about him online. And it isn't true. The theory traces back to a single hedge in a 1991 biography, where the author himself wrote he couldn't prove it. A historian who later dug into the actual 1930s radio archives found the character was created by 3 specific writers in Detroit, explicitly modeled on Tom Mix and Robin Hood, with no documented connection to Reeves at all. The comparison isn't malicious. It comes from people trying to give him more credit, not less. But the real record doesn't need the borrowed one. Bass Reeves didn't need to inspire a fictional lawman. He was a better story than the fiction. In 1902, that record collided with tragedy. Reeves's son, Bennie, went to see his estranged wife, Castella, and confronted her about an affair. She confirmed it, and by his own later account, was unapologetic about it. In a rage, he shot and killed her. In a statement he gave the following year, Bennie said, "By constant worry over her actions and the breaking up of my home and receiving such an answer, I lost all control and shot her." A warrant went out for his arrest. The marshals who normally would have served it hesitated. Nobody wanted to be the one to arrest Bass Reeves's own son, and nobody wanted to risk having to kill him if he resisted. Reeves took the warrant himself. Accounts differ on exactly how the pursuit unfolded. Some describe a 2-week manhunt through the hills, while a contemporary newspaper account suggests Bennie turned himself in almost immediately once he learned his father had been given the case. What isn't in dispute is that Bass Reeves brought his own son in, and that a jury convicted him. Bennie was sentenced to life at the federal prison in Leavenworth. He served 11 years before his sentence was commuted, was released, and by all accounts lived out the rest of his life quietly, working as a barber. Reeves never spoke publicly about what that arrest cost him. In 1907, Oklahoma became a state, and the old federal marshal system that had employed him for over 3 decades was dissolved. At 69 years old, unable to hold the position of U.S. Marshal under the new segregated state government, he took a job as an officer with the Muskogee City Police Department. For the 2 years he walked that beat, multiple contemporary accounts report that not a single crime was committed on it. His reputation alone did the work his gun had done for 30 years. He died of Bright's disease on January 12, 1910, and was buried in a grave that, for decades, nobody marked or maintained. The most successful lawman in the history of Indian Territory, the man outlaws feared by name, lay in an unmarked grave for most of the 20th century, while far less consequential men got statues.
That's finally changing. Fort Smith put up a statue of him in 2012. His name is on a bridge, a highway, a television series. We survived 32 years of work nobody else wanted in a territory that killed 120 other lawmen and walked away. It shouldn't have taken this long, and it shouldn't have needed a fictional cowboy's reflected glory to get his name said out loud. It just needed the truth told straight.